Mike, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to have you. I just did one of your workouts at a gym in Philadelphia. It was awesome. Doing the workout I'm not in bad shape, and I was worked out. So so
Good, good thing.
yeah, no, it felt great. And so you have been a guy that's been in the training industry, training everybody from athletes, Olympians, women's like Olympic hockey team. You've trained people in multiple professional sports. You train everyday people, and it sounds like everyone in between. So I'm curious. Uh, how'd you get your start? I mean, I know a little bit of your bio. I know you were a bartender for a while, so you weren't always Mike Boyle, fitness extraordinaire. There was a life before this.
Yeah. Well, I started the difference for me. So about 45 years ago, I started. So I was in some ways lucky enough to come right out of college and get into a university setting at Boston University. And actually, I started in athletic training, which is what I thought I wanted to do, what I went to college for. And then I realized very quickly that I didn't want to be an athletic trainer and I wanted to be a strength coach. The problem with that is that there weren't any strength coaches in New England. And so to be a strength coach, I had to be a volunteer strength coach. And that's kind of where the bartending part comes in. So for probably most of the 1980s, I tended bar and worked as a strength coach. A lot of it initially on a volunteer basis or for very little money, not enough money to live on, and probably didn't really get a full-time job, I would say, till the late 1980s. I'm not exactly sure what year. It's getting so long now that I'm not as good with the chronology as I once was, but it just was a developing profession at that time. It was an idea. There were a few people doing it across the country, not a lot, and just surprisingly none in New England. No one had a full-time job in New England when I started as a strength and conditioning coach.
So you were a pioneer at that point. So you didn't have. I mean, it's interesting. I think I mean, I assume there are advantages and disadvantages to kind of starting out and evolving in the industry and as a trainer. But it's interesting. You're somebody that has evolved over time, right? You didn't discover one thing and then stick with it. Like you've changed your thoughts on things.
Oh,
You've evolved. That's not easy to do in my experience, right? I think it's really hard to change for most people. It's really hard to adapt for a lot of people. I think people resist change. I think when we get to a certain age, intellectually, emotionally, we don't love. I think we we don't love changing. We don't love new things. How have you kept evolving? How have you kept being somebody that has uh, learned and evolved and developed new approaches to strength training and to training people of all walks of life?
I think I always wanted to be good at this, and I think the people that really want to be good at something are people that are willing to change and are willing to evolve because you keep learning, you keep investigating, you keep looking and saying, okay, am I at the cutting edge? I would go to seminars and I would hear somebody talk about something and I would think, that's interesting. I need to look into that. I wouldn't necessarily make the change, but I would begin to investigate the change. And as I started to investigate the change, sometimes things immediately made sense to me. I've been very good in my career at, I think, being able to look at people and say, hey, this person is better than I am in this particular area or discipline, and I should learn from them. I should incorporate that into what we're doing from a programming standpoint. And I started doing that initially, obviously, with other strength coaches. I started looking and saying, okay, what are people doing? How are they doing it? And then I started looking at the rehab world and saying, what are they doing? How are they doing it? And I think I have an entrepreneurial mind. I'm kind of an early adopter. I I guess I like innovation. So if you really look into my background, people will say I invented training for the NFL Combine, which I probably did. in the 1980s, but I only invented training for the NFL Combine because we had a player that was going to the NFL Combine, and
For,
they
for,
were
for,
all
for listeners that don't know what that is, can you explain what the NFL
yeah. So
Combine
the
is?
NFL Combine, basically, if you watch TV now, they will call it the Underwear Olympics. So it's basically these guys running around. It's the way they evaluate players for the NFL draft, and most of what you see on television will be snippets of the 40-yard dash, which is sort of the NFL's chosen method of measuring speed. But they do speed testing, they do strength testing, they do a 225-pound bench press test for maximum reps. It's actually kind of an odd, outdated sort of process. They do some agility drills. But the biggest thing is that everything is either scored or timed. And we started to look at the idea that we thought that these were very trainable things. And in the past, people just showed up. When they first started, people showed up and they told them there's a bunch of tests. Hey, we're going to run a 40-yard dash. We're going to have you bench 225 as many times as you can. We're going to have you run sideways, right, left, right, and we're going to time it. And we're going to have you jump as high as you can, and we're going to measure it. But I just looked at it and thought, okay, if I'm having this guy go, because we were at Boston University, so we would now be considered a mid-major school. At that time, it was considered one double A, which basically is not the big time. So the easiest way to look at it, one level below the Nebraskas and Notre Dames and Alabamas of the world. And I thought, for this guy to have a really good opportunity, let's practice the tests. And we practiced the tests, and this guy went and did really, really well at the NFL Combine. And then suddenly people started coming to me and saying, hey, I want to do this. Guy's name was Billy Brooks, went on to a really long NFL career. But guys started coming to me and saying, hey, I want to do the same thing. And then agents started coming to me and bringing players and saying, hey, I got a player. Can we get him ready for the Combine? Now it's a huge business. It's every marginal prospect in America is training somewhere for the NFL Combine with somebody who's kind of a young Mike Boyle type person. And I was one of the first people to do that. But to me, it seemed very commonsensical. Hey, this is a really important part of this guy's evaluation for the possibility of playing in the National Football League. Let's kind of put our best foot forward. But
I'm curious. You said this is outdated. Like, when you look at this, the NFL Combine, you're like, this is kind of strange. Why is it outdated? As a guy who thinks about strength, who thinks about performance, why do you look at this and think, I wouldn't do this?
Well, it's very interesting. It's outdated, one, because it is pretty much what they've been doing since they started, which tells you almost automatically that it's outdated. There's
This
been
gets back to my first question, right? Very seldom do people change, right? Very seldom do people change.
People do not. I would say that is a very astute observation. Most people don't change. I have a good friend, and he said one time, he said, people don't grow up, they just get older. And I think it's the same thing in terms of people. The people you knew that had this problem in high school probably still have that problem and probably still exhibit that behavior. They just happen to be older and maybe mask it a little bit better. But
I was a huge fan of The West Wing, and I've watched that show through
show
many times. And there was a great scene where President Bartlett, played by, of course, Martin Sheen, says, CJ, people think the hardest thing in sports is to hit a round ball with a round bat. No, the hardest thing is going into the Super Bowl locker room at halftime and needing to switch the strategy because what got you there isn't working.
Yeah.
But that's it, right? I mean, so what would you do differently?
Well, one, I wouldn't bench press 225 pounds. I would do some sort of test that's more relative to the person. So to have a guy who weighs 325 pounds bench 225 pounds makes no sense. He's, in a relative sense, he's benching about 2/3 of his body weight for repetitions. He's obviously going to be able to do that very easily. That would be like me right now at 190 pounds, them saying, hey, we're going to do as many reps as you can do with 135 pounds. I wouldn't view that as a strength test. I would view that as a muscular endurance test, but it is in their mind a strength test, yet the numbers creep up into the 40s. So it's not a strength test, it's an endurance test. So they're testing strength. They're trying to extrapolate endurance to strength. Not very efficient. Probably would be a lot easier and maybe a tad less safe. But if you said, okay, we want to see how many times you can manage your body weight or how many times you can manage 80% of your body weight or whatever the number would be, That would be the first. And 40-yard dash, same thing. Do you know the reason they do the 40-yard dash in the NFL?
I do not know this. I know the 40 is the way everybody's like, what's your 40 time?
It's the distance that you had to run to cover a kick as a kickoff guy. So initially, and I think it was uh, one of the early Cowboys. I'm gonna get the name wrong, but one of the early Cowboys executives had said, "Hey, we want to get a measure of who's going to be able to run down and cover a kickoff." And they realized that the distance covered was about 40 yards, so they started to time 40 yards as a measure of speed. There are a lot better ways now to measure speed. They still are hand starting the 40-yard dash, but part of it is because they don't want the numbers to get higher. If you time it accurately, the numbers are not as low. And so to get a faster time, hand start yields a faster 40-yard dash. Electronic, if it was electronic start, electronic finish, you're going to get a slower time. And
But
that
if
would kind
everybody who care if everybody gets a slower time, who cares?
right. But the problem is when you compare it to last year, when you look, they might want to look and think, hey, how does Mike compare? Scott
Yeah.
got drafted last year, and I want to compare Mike and Scott. They play the same position. So they've just kind of clung to things because they've always done it. Even the vertical jump, they still do the old-fashioned vertical jump where they reach up and hit the machine. There's something called a vertex that kind of measures the difference between jump and reach. But there's a lot of fudging between, you reach up and measure how high you can reach. But one of the things we used to do is try to teach guys how to kind of, I used to always say, don't give anything on the reach. You don't win the reach. If you win the reach, you could potentially take 4 inches off your vertical jump. If you just go in there and kind of try to be relaxed and touch the lowest thing you can touch, then you're going to get a higher vertical jump. And interestingly, in the 1990s, we had some of the best vertical jumps at the combine, and part of it was and I always say it's not that we were cheating. It's much like the tax code sort of thing. We were using the system to our advantage in any way that was legal. And, we did that with teaching. We got very, trying to think what the word is, I guess, orchestrated about teaching lateral movement, because you run what they call a 20-yard shuttle. So you basically run 5 yards to the right, 10 yards to the left, and then 5 yards to the right. So you run effectively 20 yards, but it's a 2 change of direction drill. And we broke the drill down to the point where we were rehearsing it like the Arthur Murray School of Dance. Guys, okay, you have to do it's like three steps to your right. You have to touch right foot. Left foot has to go here. You have to push with the left foot. The left is going to take you. Now it's 6 steps to your left. You have to touch with your left foot. You have to put your left hand down. And excuse me, we'd be counting every step that the guy took, because we realized steps are time. You can't take, it's really hard to take 8 steps faster than you took 6. And the one thing we realized, we used to tell guys all the time, you can't miss by 1. You can only miss by 2. Because if you're going to your right and you need to touch with your right foot, if you come up a step short, you have to take 2 steps to then get your right foot to the line. So it just, little stuff. But we spent a lot of time breaking down the drills and looking at this and saying, hey, is there a way that we can do this better? And it yielded. I mean, I had a bunch of first rounders. If you go back and study it in I don't even know what year, but it was probably very early 1990s. I had the first non-collegiate player ever taken in the first round, a kid named Eric Swan, who I trained.
Wow.
Went literally from high school to the NFL draft and ended up being, I think, the 7th overall pick to the Cardinals that year. And then a couple of years later, we had a guy jump up 3 rounds and I think go 8th overall, Mike Mamula, that ended up on the cover of Sports Illustrated. So that was where I really got a lot of attention for the combine thing. So the point being, I was not afraid of kind of questioning the status quo and saying, hey, can we do this better? If there's a system, is there a way maybe to work the system? I know that sounds terrible.
So, okay, I'm curious. So you just talked about, look, timing the 40 this is a sort of an archaic way of timing it. We could do things better. We could probably redesign things. To learn, I think, to evolve, like you've evolved over decades, I think requires some intellectual humility. And yet it strikes me as getting better and better when you're the guy people look to, like, all right, Mike Boyle's the guy. naturally, I think it becomes harder to stay humble, right? Because you're the guy people look to. I mean, how do you kind of stay aware of what you don't know? How do you stay on your toes? How do you kind of evaluate? Uh, if how do you stay open to being a lifelong learner?
You're going to laugh at the response, but I think it requires a strong dose of insecurity and imposter syndrome. And
It's all, as does a lot of life.
if you have both of those,
Yeah.
then I think you'll be a lifelong learner, because I think you never really get confident. You never really, I always tell everybody, I still have those imposter dreams. I have the dream on a pretty consistent basis where I kind of wake up and I have to take a test at college, the last test in college, and I haven't gone to the class and I haven't studied and I'm totally unprepared. And my whole college experience is going to go down the drain. And it's a regularly occurring dream for me. And I think that is the imposter syndrome. And I think if you don't have a little of that, you're probably not going to be good. I think if you're not a little bit insecure, a little bit worried about what other people are doing, what other people are thinking, you're probably not going to be really good, because you're not going to be out there looking. And I'm always looking, I'm always reading, I'm always looking and thinking, okay, what is somebody else doing? Is somebody else doing this better than us? Are we missing something? And there'll come times, like, on occasion, when I'll look and think, yes, this person is doing this better than us. And my staff used to go crazy because I'd come back and suddenly say, hey, we're changing this. And they'd be like, why? Like, why are we changing this? And I would always say, because I listened to somebody smarter than me, and they explained it in a way that made me believe that what they were doing is better than what we're doing. And as a result, we're going to change what we're doing. And other people that were working with me, for me, or whatever it was, would find that way more frustrating than I did. I didn't find it frustrating at all. I still love that experience. I love meeting somebody and having them sort of challenge or question what I'm doing, and then have to go back and think about it, because you've got to go through sort of the defense in your mind. Okay, am I right or are they right? But as I said, I've been very, very good about being able to look at people and think, nope, this guy's right. And as a result, we're going to do something differently. And then usually I will write about it or post about it. And it's very interesting. I get a lot of flack for it. I'll get flack from people in the fitness world who say, oh, Mike Boyle is just all over the place. He's a flip-flopper. He's constantly changing his mind. And I will always post back with people and say, no, Mike Boyle is a learner. And if you're going to criticize me, if that's going to be the criticism, great. I love that. I'll take that one every time. It's like one of my favorite books was Adam Grant's Think Again. And I say that to people all the time, in terms of thinking again is literally learning. The whole idea of thinking again that Grant talks about in the book is learning. I want you to think again about a topic, whether that's speed development or strength development or, whatever it is. Think again about it and ask yourself, hey, am I really doing it the best way? I just was listening to a podcast today with Andy Galpin, who's another guy who's very accomplished in my field, and talking about how to build muscle. And it really made me think, okay, should we be doing things differently? Should we be viewing things out of a slightly different lens? And I don't know, I'm not done. It's a really long, it's a 2-hour podcast, but it's got me thinking.
What's the best idea you ever gave up? An idea that you liked, that you thought was working, and you just threw it in the trash, and we're like,
I would say the best idea is conventional strength training. So if you look at, so for you, like you're, let's just say you're a 40-year-old male. You just did our Thrive workout at City Fitness, probably in Philly. And one of the things that you probably noticed is you didn't use a barbell. You didn't do it. I did not.
I did. Yeah, I indeed did do this. And there was no barbell.
As I said it, you were like, there was no barbell. And I think that was one of the, and now, I mean, there are people who are absolutely livid about the idea that I say our adults don't use barbells, and they're so entrenched in barbells that they can't think beyond barbells. And I would look at it, and obviously a lifetime of training athletes, a lifetime of doing rehab, I would look at it and think, generally speaking, adult client in their 40s, I would rather they dumbbell bench press than barbell bench press. I'd rather they do some sort of single leg squat variation than a conventional back squat. I would rather they do some sort of deadlift variation rather than a conventional barbell deadlift. So we've, with our adults, have moved away from barbells. And I think for a lot of people, that is just absolutely blasphemous that we would think about the idea of not using barbells. They look at it and think, no, the barbell is the thing. This is what you do. And I look at it and think, no, the thing that we're like, I always tell people the business that I'm in with adults is the life-changing business. I'm trying to make you feel better, move better, fight aging. I don't think the barbell is the best tool for that. I guess if you said, what is the dumbbell the better tool? Yeah. Is your body weight a better tool? Yeah. I think there's better tools for the job. And again, I've always been a writer and a reader, but I would write about things like that. And I would say things like part of what's going to make you good is the ability to choose the right tool for the job. The ability to look in the toolbox and think, when you look at the toolbox, you think there might be 5 hammers in there. There might be a 5-pound sledgehammer. There might be a 2-pound framing hammer. There might be a little, what they call a ball peen hammer, that's going to help you tap on something. And you got to be able to look there and think, okay, which hammer do I need? And do I need a sledgehammer? Do I need a little teeny tack hammer? And then be able to apply that. So I think if you talk about the biggest idea, that's clearly the biggest idea that I've sort of moved away from.
Why do human beings want to be strong? Like I mean,
it goes back to the beach and the kid getting sand kicked in his face. I mean, they've had those ads since. So when I was a child, I saw those ads where there was a muscular guy on the beach who could walk around and people looked at him and thought, wow. I think initially it is a spousal attraction technique. That's why people want to be strong, because they equate muscles with being attractive to a partner. And then they equate muscles with the ability to sort of defend themselves against some sort of aggressor. So I think it's very, very primal when you really think about it. So it goes back to being able to fight off an attacker or being able to find a mate. And then it's morphed into something significantly bigger than that. But I still think it comes back to, and because you talked about the basic insecurity, right? I mean, I started out, I wanted to lift weights. I wanted to be a football player. I wanted to get bigger. How do you get bigger? You lift weights. But I also started to realize, wow, when you start to lift weights, you will get more attention from members of the opposite sex who will think, oh, wow, this person is maybe more attractive looking because they have muscles. Then there's the problem that we got into in the 70s and 80s was that we didn't know about steroids, and we didn't we didn't understand how some people were getting better muscles than other people. And then it got to a point where muscularity became unattractive. Where some people would look at some of the bodybuilders and think, I don't want to look like that. And we used to always kind of laugh and say, don't worry about it. The amount of work you got to do to look like that and the amount of drugs you got to take to look like that. The last thing you have to worry about is I might wake up tomorrow and look like an early Arnold Schwarzenegger. That's not the case here. So don't worry about it. But people did worry about it.
It's not just drugs, right? It's genetics, right? I mean, there's a British guy I watch sometimes on Instagram. I mean, he's an interesting guy, and he's very sort of no nonsense about health and fitness. And he basically says, like all these fitness influencers, they're influencers, a lot of them because of genetics. They pick up weights, they get on a treadmill, whatever they do, high hit classes. Their DNA, their genetics respond to it. And so people see them looking great and they say, you want to be a fitness influencer. and a lot of these people, right? I mean, that people look at, just like you're not going to look, you look at Arnold, you're never going to be Arnold, right? There's not just the drugs, but there's genetics, there's the drugs, there's the amount of time at the gym. But there's a lot of influencers, I'm sure, right? That look, they won a genetic lottery and they're one of the people. It's not as though, I think a lot of those folks we're not all on a level playing field, right? When we pick up a weight or we do HIIT training or something, results will be different, right?
Right, exactly. That's funny. So the podcast I listened to was Andy Galpin and a guy named Dr. Mike Roberts. And one of the things that Mike Roberts talked about was the idea that there are clearly responders to strength training.
Yeah.
And I've been saying that for years in terms of one of the reasons some people, even never mind influencers, but There are strength coaches who think they're good because they work with an NFL team. And an NFL team is literally a hand-picked group of genetically gifted responders. That's what you get. These are people, I always say, if you had a room full of cement blocks and all these guys did was lift cement blocks, they would still get bigger. They would still look better. They would still run faster because they are as genetically geared to respond to strength training as any person on planet Earth. And so, yes, you're absolutely right. And that's why, like in the influences, genetics plays a massive part of this. Genetics plays a huge part in terms of how lean you are. Now, and again, yes, you can change these things, but also the drugs underlie everything because most of these people are lying. Even our guys in our age bracket, guys, oh, I don't take steroids, but I'm on TRT. It's the same thing, buddy. You're taking testosterone, okay? Maybe there's like adult old man steroids that they're giving out, but the original steroid was testosterone. Every steroid ever made is a synthetic derivative of testosterone. So it's amazing. I always joke that you kind of go to the average Gold's Gym and you look at, oh yeah, there's another low T guy over there, and it's some guy in his 60s that does look like Arnold, and you think, and he's they love to tell you, oh yeah, I've been working hard, I'm in here, I'm pumping, and it's like, and let's fill in the blank here. But
that's the first thing I thought when I saw like a Robert Kennedy Jr. workout video. It was when he was running for president or something, and so he's at a beach gym on the West Coast or something, and I mean the guy looks amazing, right? And,
yeah,
and at his age, that's not natural, right?
Wouldn't be surprised at all if he's a TRT guy. That would not, because it's hugely prevalent in kind of the 40 to 60-year-old male thing, because again, and we could rail on the health system for a really long time here, but there's money to be made by saying, because the reality is decline in testosterone is natural. It's much like like perimenopause and menopause are natural. Those are big topics on the female side, but the reality is you go through this sort of period of where you're able to have children, and then you go through a period of time when you're no longer able to have children. It's a natural cycle of life. And I always go back to the old, and you're probably not old enough to remember, but there used to be a great commercial. I don't even remember what it was for, but the tagline was, "It's not nice to fool Mother Nature." And I always look at people and think, it's not nice to fool Mother Nature. You're often going to pay the price for messing with Mother Nature. And you should. Aging is supposed to happen. And everybody, but I always think what we want, aging is one of these, we want to be like freaking Rocky slugging it out to the very end with aging. But we are going to age. Every person in this world is going to die. I've let off talks with that sometimes when I do these adult training talks, where I start with, hey, just so you know, I got some bad news. Everybody in this room is going to die.
Yeah.
And everybody
someday I've said this in talks before. I've said I said, someday people are going to sit around and listen to nice things about you at a church or synagogue or something. And
hopefully.
then hey, hopefully. And then they're going to leave and eat potato salad. And that's how you're going to go out, right?
Yep. Well, one of my good friends, Al Vermeil, who was the strength coach for the Bulls during their great run when Jordan was there, he used to always say, Mike, just remember one thing: the size of your wake will be determined by the weather. And it's like, but it's true.
It's interesting too that with medical advancements, we can keep people alive so long. You look at we saw Joe Biden, who was president, it was the most important job in the country, maybe in the world, and aging and in decline. And and Donald Trump is now the oldest president I think we've had. You look at Pope Francis. You look at, we're able to keep people alive much longer. So in some sense, right, I guess there's an urgency to the kind of stuff you do, because quality of life, and this is going to increase, right? This trend where people are living longer. And what is your decline going to, like you're saying, what's your decline going to look like? Is it going to be, is the quality of life at the end, and strength matters a lot to that, right?
Right. Strength matters. Strength is probably the most important variable in that, truthfully. Actually, power is the most important variable, actually, because We were talking about this today with another one of my clients, but you lose power at about 1.5 times the rate you lose strength. So you can continue to be strong, but if you're not, so you did kind of the Thrive workout, and in that Thrive workout, there's a little bit of medicine ball throwing, and there's a little bit of box jumping or bounding or something in there, because it's really the ability to move fast that's lost at a greater rate than just the ability to be strong. But the important thing to understand is that it's a very, very complicated equation in the sense that, again, because you went through the workout, there's foam rolling, there's stretching, because there's tissue quality. Your tissue as you age, I always say, life is a gradual transition from filet mignon to beef jerky. And you're trying to stop that, right?
That should be on a t-shirt.
Yeah. I probably should try to get someone's going to
You
steal that.
should market that, Mike.
Yeah. But it's true in terms of we gradually get kind of drier and tighter and crustier. And the filet mignon beef jerky analogy is the perfect analogy for what's going on in aging, because it is actually physiologically happening. We have lower water content as we get older. We have less elasticity as we get older. All of these things are documented, and they're all things that we can work on, but they're not things that we can stop. And that's the interesting part, is that we can probably put the brakes on aging, but we will not stop it from happening. Because I always look at it now. I'll be 67 in a couple months, and people are always like, "You look unbelievable for 67." And I think, "Yeah, thank you. That's great." But I look about the same as I did at 37. And the difference for me is I've been able to keep the brakes on and slow this process down. But at 37, people would be probably look at me and think, hey, people used to, the joke with me was always like, you'd look at me and think like, wow, that's Mike Boyle. Not very impressive. Now the 67-year-old Mike Boyle is way more impressive than the 37-year-old Mike Boyle, because they looked very much alike. And the only thing that's good for me is that I haven't declined as much in that 30-year period as many of my peers has. So what you're really, and it's a very, I think for some people, maybe a negative way of looking at it, but what we're really trying to do is slow the decline. And in some cases, if we get, because we'll get people who show up in their 50s, they can't get off the floor without a lot of work. You watch, I always think that you want to know what kind of shape somebody's in, just ask them to lay down on the floor and get up, and watch the process of like how many hand touches does it take, how many knee touches does it take to get down on the floor, and then how many does it take to get up again. And that'll tell you a lot about that person. If somebody can sort of spring up, bounce themselves up, you look and think, okay, that person's pretty fit. They're doing okay in this kind of anti-aging battle. The guy who was really doing a great job in this area, Peter Attia, and then
sure.
Peter's name popped up in the Epstein files, which is never where you want it to be. But I think, unfortunately, that hurt a really.
I'm like, my name is not in the Epstein files. Just to go on record, right? And yours is not yet either. I mean, I've not heard. Look, if all our listeners, Mike Boyle, not in the Epstein files. Good guy.
But Peter's message, this anti-aging method, I think he called it the centenarian decathlon, and it was kind of like, what are the 10 things you want to be able to do in your last decade, what he would call the marginal decade of life, I think was the term he used. But you start thinking about things like, it's simple stuff, right? What do you want to be able to do? You want to be able to pick up a grandchild. You want to be able to carry groceries. You want to be able to put your suitcase in the overhead compartment. You want to be able to go upstairs without holding on to the railing. All of these sort of really basic tasks that you realize, or maybe you don't realize, that you're losing, because suddenly you get on the plane and you look and think, wow, here's this person who they can't get their suitcase in the overhead anymore. Or here's this person that has to go over and hold the railing in order to get up the stairs because they no longer have the balance to just, and I find myself, I'll go over sometimes and touch the railing, and I literally think like it's like the third rail. Like, oop, don't touch the railing. Keep walking up the stairs unaided, because you want to be able to do this. You want this to keep going. And like I said, carrying things, picking up kids. Like, I like to work. I like to work in the weight room. I like to clean up the weight room. I like to pick up dumbbells. I like to pick up plates and put them back, because those are all tasks that are really helpful for me in my anti-aging fight.
What do you think scares people most about aging? I mean, do you encounter lots of folks that have anxiety about it in your work?
I don't think we run into a lot of people that have anxiety about it, but I think I think what the greatest fear is losing your independence. And I'm going to
Hmm.
tell you a terrible story. Not, it's not really a terrible story. It's a terribly inappropriate story. But I was having a conversation once with a guy named Dennis Kaiser. If you've ever seen Kaiser equipment, it is this really cool high tech air powered equipment where you basically press the button and the resistance is provided by air, and it all is
I have
attached to
seen
the
these. I
compressor.
have seen.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Yes,
I love
absolutely.
we have that's most of what we have from a machine standpoint in our gym, our Kaiser equipment. But one of the things that Dennis talked about was that he said do you know when you go into an old age home, assisted living, or whatever it is? He said, do you know what point your kids give up on you? And I thought, uh, not really. And he said, well, it's the point where you've lost your thoracic mobility. Thoracic mobility is critical to staying out of a nursing home. You know why? Because somebody with good thoracic mobility can wipe their own ass. Okay. That's the point
Wow.
in time where suddenly, like, your kids are like, oh, dad, we love you. You're great. We'll do anything for you except wipe your ass. And then when it comes to that point, they're like, okay, we need to get you someplace where someone can do that for you because we're not doing that. But you start thinking about what is that? It is literally the ability to rotate your trunk, right? It's the ability to rotate and flex. So suddenly you start thinking about just maintaining that ability to rotate and flex, to squat, to get up and down off a toilet on your own, to be able to care for yourself when you're on the toilet. Those are like those are the final stages before somebody says, "Hey, sorry, we love you, but." And so there was probably a joke in there actually when I didn't realize that. But
Yeah,
so and so when it really comes down to it, you think, okay, I need to maintain lower body strength. I need to be able to get myself on and off a toilet, on and out of, in and out of a chair, up and down stairs. I need to maintain my mobility, not necessarily, but flexibility is a component of mobility, right? So I've got to be stretching, I've got to be moving. We know that your thoracic spine becomes stiffer as you get older. So there's all these things that you've got to do. And I guess going back to our previous point, none of them require a barbell, a bench press, a bar on your back, but they do require some sort of resistance training component. And
yeah.
so,
I'm thinking right now as you're talking about aging and what's possible and what can be arrested, what's inevitable, what can change. What like how we can develop. And there's a book I love called Failure of Nerve, and it's a book about leadership by a rabbi, Edwin Friedman. He's long since deceased, I think. But it's all about leaders and emotional self awareness and things like that. And he talks about in 1957 when Roger Bannister broke the 4 minute mile and how that was like wow. I mean, broke the five or I'm sorry,
4 minute mile, you're right.
yeah, broke the 4 minute mile. Um, and then there was in 1994 this African runner who broke another mile record. And when asked, he says we tend to attribute Bannister's fear to new training techniques rather than the capacity to get outside the emotional processes of running. But in 1994, an African runner understood when asked how he thought his colleague was able to lower the mile record by one of the largest amounts ever accomplished in one race. This other runner replied, "He's not caught up in the mythology of Western runners." It goes on. He says similar stories can be told about how Chuck Yeager broke the sound barrier when he sped up at precisely the point where others slowed down because the plane began to rattle as it approached the barrier. I think about emotional myths. We all have limitations, right? And limitations are real. But there's a difference in our actual limitations and our perceived limitations. So I'm wondering what kind of mythology you've got to get out when training people, or what kind of things that they may have bought into about their capacities or lack of capacity that you as a coach have to say, all right, we might have to like do the shake the etch a sketch here because you're coming in with preconceived notions about what's possible, what's not possible, about how we're going to do it. I mean, what does that look like for you as a coach?
Well, we get it all the time in terms of because so if you came into my facility, you'd see this, and it's marketing, right? But there's all these jerseys up of people that have trained with us over the course of decades. And one of the big myths we get with people, I can't train there. This is a place for athletes. We have to tell people all the time, no, this isn't a place for athletes. This is a place for anybody who wants to age well. So that's the biggest thing. I think you have to get people over the inevitability of their doctor saying to them, I think a lot of it is the medical profession. Oh, your back is ruined, your knee is ruined, your hip is shot. I mean, you have to realize, and again, I can be highly critical of the medical industrial complex, but medicine makes their money on spinal surgery, joint replacements, and heart surgery. Those, I think, are three of the big five drivers of profits in hospitals. And people will go to doctors, and instead of someone saying, you need to start exercising, they'll say, oh, you need a hip replacement. I see people all the time where I look and think, you do not need a hip replacement. You need to exercise. You need to get stronger. I remember saying to one of my clients one time about it was the topically different, but the statement applies. I told her, she said, what do you think about this? I said, you have a really bad case of weakness. I said, you have a bad case of weakness and we can cure that by
Wow.
getting stronger, right? Most people in America have a really bad case of weakness. They have a really bad case of unfitness, if you could say that. People think, oh, my heart is bad. Well, you don't work your heart. And we've done this, the fitness industry has done this to itself because for a long time, we would say things like, oh, get out and take a walk, work in the garden. And I would be like, that is the lowest bar I've ever heard. Go out and take a walk or work in the garden. That is much better than watching television. But that is not probably going to keep you from dying. So we've got to be able to look at this and think part of what we're trying to do is, and I always use kind of my tagline these days is safe and smart. I want to raise that bar in a very safe and smart way where I can say to people, hey, we're going to teach you how to stress your heart in a way that is both safe and smart. And we're going to teach you to weight train in a way that's both safe and smart because we've got people who think, oh, if I do this, I'm going to get hurt. Or we've got people who think, well, I'm too old for this. And I would look at it and say, you're never too old. We've seen this in nonagenarians, 90s, where they get them on a strength training program and they get stronger and they get more mobile and more capable, more able to do their activities of daily living. And so I don't think there is a point in time when you shouldn't be doing this. And it's great for us. And this, because it's funny, a guy like you encounters a guy like me, right? We're kind of in opposite spheres. You would think that if it's a Venn diagram, our circles probably shouldn't overlap, but suddenly because you go to a Thrive workout, our circles overlap and suddenly I'm talking to somebody like you. And that's why I want to be on podcasts like this, because I want to talk to more people in the world. They're not the athletes. And part of it is because it's really good for me. Our business is booming. Our adult business, booming. We have people signing up daily. We don't advertise at all. We do not spend any money on advertising, but we continue to build our adult business is building at a far greater rate than our athlete business is building, because there's more and more people in their 50s, in their 60s, and in their 70s who are hearing this kind of message and realizing literally, hey, it's never too late. It's sometimes I see some people in their 60s and 70s and think, oh, it's going to be much harder, but it's never too late. We have great clients, and a lot of the presentations now I'm doing are more on adult training, and we've got great videos of some of our 70-year-old clients just skipping and throwing medicine balls and lifting weights and doing things really safe, really smart.
See, this is the power, the emotional myth stuff, right? In this book by Friedman, he talks about what happened in the age of exploration and how it just got Europe unstuck from the Middle Ages. And you get the Renaissance, you get all this, cultural development, technological development. But part of it is, he says, you get unstuck when your world is expanded. And I think that must be huge, getting people unstuck, right? Getting people to realize that their perceived limitations don't necessarily correspond to their actual limitations, right? That there's more possible at 70 than they think, right?
And that you gave the perfect example. So Bannister breaks the 4-minute mile. I think in the next year, 20 people ran under 4 minutes, right? What was at once, it was impossible. No one is going to run a mile under 4 minutes. Suddenly, Bannister runs the mile under 4 minutes. And within the next year, 20 more people do that. So I think that's exactly what you're talking about, getting people unstuck, getting people to realize that they're not destined for a nursing home. I had another one of my clients who I became really friendly with, used to always say, Mike, everybody's going to spend money on their health. They just have to decide when and how.
That's great.
And it's true. He said, and he would be like, it might be a really nice nursing home. It might be a kick-ass casket that you get buried in. He said, but you're going to spend that money. And I've used that line a lot because sometimes people say, oh, but your services are expensive.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, like a nursing home is expensive. Nursing home,
yeah.
You're not going to go bankrupt trying to train with me. But you could go bankrupt if you ended up in a nursing home.
And you'll feel better.
Right. And you may not, again, you're hoping, I mean, I hate to say it, but I'm hoping you die of natural causes before anybody puts you in a nursing home. I'm hoping that whatever, your heart stops, something else happens, and you don't end up having to just go and sort of live out your last days, because that's the other thing you talked about, was that we can keep people alive longer, but you have to ask yourself, what's the cost?
Yeah.
And because, I mean, I hate to say it, and I don't know if I could do it when I do get to that age or to that point, but there's a part of me that believes kind of in the euthanasia part, where you think, hey, if I'm at the point where I'm so incapacitated that I can no longer care for myself and that I'm basically just a vegetable being kept alive in a hospital bed, I would probably like somebody to say, okay, we can quietly end this for you with no more fanfare. And, we can get your loved ones together and we can all say goodbye. And that's the end of that. And I do think that sometimes we're just prolonging life, and maybe the only person that's benefiting is the hospital.
And isn't the irony here that...
How's that for a topic switch? I managed to get us.
No, but this is interesting, right? Because I think the irony here is we have chronic weakness, right? People are chronically... I heard you say in a podcast I listened to, like 20% of people have a gym membership. Only 18% of the 20% use it once a week. And then it goes down from there. How many people are actually doing functional workouts, all this stuff. So we have people that are chronically weak. And at the same time, we get better and better medically. So we can keep you in chronic weakness and do medical heroics, right? So we can do massively invasive procedures and stuff at people in their 80s, where they've spent a long time deteriorating, which they could have been. I think what you're saying is they could have been in a very different place,
right,
had they just done some functional strength training, and had they just dedicated a little bit of time to moving and to tending to,
right. I always think it would have been great if the doctor had said to you, like, take 2 doses of weight training and call me next week. Right? But they don't do that. They don't. I mean, our medical system does not even really recommend exercise.
Yeah.
It's not, because it's not a profitable intervention. The only person who makes money out of you exercising is me. But if we put you on a drug, or if we schedule you for some procedure, or you just, again, if we just get you in the pipeline, if you just show up and say, hey, my knee's really sore, and suddenly it's like, okay, you're going to get an x-ray, and you're going to get an MRI, and you're going to maybe get an injection, and you're going to maybe go to physical therapy, and then you're going to maybe go back to the orthopedic guy who's going to recommend a joint replacement, and then you're going to get the joint replacement done, and then you're going to go back to physical therapy, and then you're going to take medication for the pain. And then, or if I said, hey, maybe if you go and get your legs stronger, maybe your knee won't hurt anymore, right? One guy makes money, me, as opposed to the system humming along swimmingly the way that we would like the system to hum along, right? I mean, it's not, we do not have, and again, I get It can get philosophical, but we don't have a healthcare system. We have a sick care system. We have a symptom treatment system. And one of my friends, I forget who told me to put it this way, but it was great. He said, going to the doctor is like going into the auto mechanic and saying my check engine light is on. And the mechanic looking at you, giving you a piece of duct tape and saying, just stick that over your dashboard where the red light is, and you'll be fine. And you go in and you think, but you just made it so I can't see the check engine light. And he's like, exactly. Keep driving. Because eventually the car will croak and you'll need a new car. And then everybody makes money again, right? But that's kind of what happens. We go in with a symptom. I go in and it's like, okay, maybe, because I'm finally at the point. I made it to 60, no drugs. 62, I think they finally were like, we really, you've got to take a statin. You're doing yourself a disservice if you don't. I didn't necessarily agree, but I started thinking, okay, I can't be 62 and thinking I know more than all the top cardiologists in America. So I started. And then the next thing I know, suddenly, well, your blood pressure is a little high. We want you to take a blood pressure medication, so I go from 60 to 66 and suddenly now I get up. I only take 3 pills in the morning. That's low.
At 60. Yeah.
But getting to 60 and taking 0, I mean, I have people that have get started on a statin when they were 40 and people that were taking blood pressure medication in their 40s, and no one's saying, hey, there's, maybe if you got your VO2 max up to something that's acceptable for your age, maybe we could get you off this. It's the same with, adult onset diabetes. Think about, I could go on forever about the medical system, but we changed when we realized that we could give children adult onset diabetes. The reaction of the medical system was, shit, better change the name. Because it used to be adult onset and juvenile onset diabetes, right? You had kids, a kid that was born diabetic was a juvenile onset diabetic. A person who effectively, you make yourself diabetic. That's what you do. You make yourself diabetic and you're considered an adult onset diabetic. The nutritional status of our children was so poor that we were making young children, say under 12, they all of a sudden were getting adult onset diabetes. But instead of someone saying, oh my God, raise the flag. And this is why I am, in some ways, I'm a Kennedy fan, because I look at it, he's thinking, let's change the food system. Let's not change. We want to be able to look at this and say, don't change the name of the disease. Figure out why we managed to give it to kids. And we managed to give it to kids because the food supply sucks. We're letting them eat crap all of the time, and they don't exercise. And we're taking phys ed out of the schools.
And Kennedy's solution is you just hit your food and cook it up, right? You hit the bear, throw it in the truck.
Yeah, store it in the car, bring it in. It's great.
Throw it in the car, right? You can eat it.
There's a lot of things, but when you look like in the big picture, they're correct. We need to correct the system. The system is incredibly flawed, but there's so much money in the system, that nobody wants to stop it. It's like it's this train that's hurtling forward, and money is just being piled on the train all the time, and everybody thinks like, oh, hey, we could just slow down the train, but nah, like keep the train going and keep the money coming. And we've created, like I said, a sick care system. We've created a system of treating symptoms as opposed to saying to people, hey, if you exercised, there's a really good chance that your heart problem would change. There's a really good chance that your diabetes problem would change. These are actually, there are kind of diseases that you get, right? And then there are diseases that you give yourself.
Yeah.
And they're different.
Right.
So we've got to be able to look at that and realize that the diseases that we're giving ourselves are very controllable, and we should probably be putting more time and energy. And then that's where, like I said, I look at it and think or guys like me are really well positioned for this, because people are, and what it's taken is people seeing the quality of life of their parent whose life is extended and is spending this sort of extended period of time in the nursing home and kind of being shuttled from doctor's appointment to doctor's appointment, and realizing that, okay, I don't want that. And realizing, again, the baby boomers, there's a lot of disposable income out there. There's a lot more time. So you've got people that are retired, you've got people that have money. It's kind of the perfect storm for fitness, because suddenly these people are thinking, why shouldn't I do this?
And you're a guy. It's interesting because you have said you've said to people like I'm the outlier. I like working out, right? I enjoy it. It's sort of therapeutic for me, mentally and stuff. Most people do not. Most people don't love it, right? You say with just 2 hours a week. Okay, you don't need to be in a gym every day for 90 minutes. You don't need to be training body parts and back day and leg day and this day and that day. You're saying if people give you like 2 hours a week, okay, just focus 2 hours, do a little foam rolling, do a little stretching, do some moves where you're exerting your power, whole body. That's it. Like you're saying 2 hours a week.
Yep. 2 hours a week
Can
will completely change your life in 2 hours a week if you do it right.
All right. So, and how much? Let me ask you this. So, with the 2 hours, how much also is dietary? Like, how much do you tell the folks coming in? Hey,
Not a significant amount. I think diet, again, nutrition to me is incredibly simple. Basically eat meat, fruits and vegetables, and you'd probably be okay.
Yeah.
Eliminate processed food. Try to, and there's a million. There's an old book called Food Rules that Michael Pollan wrote, and I think he said, if something can be passed out a window, it's not food. And I thought that's a really good guideline, right?
It's interesting. I read a book years ago called The Warrior Diet, and it was by this guy Ori Hofmilker. I don't know if you heard of this book, but
I've heard of the book. I don't remember the author's name.
Yeah, he was an Israeli special forces guy, Renaissance man. I mean, he's a very interesting guy. But he sort of contrasted the Roman warriors versus the Egyptians. And he's like, look, these Roman legionnaires, they're marching all day, they're moving all day, they're eating a lot of protein nuts at night. They're kind of big meal at the end of the day, grazing during the day, versus the Egyptians who have all this grain, right? They're eating all the time. They have a comfortable and predictable life. And he's like, look, this is why the Romans were ass kickers than the Egyptians. We don't think of the Egyptians as the best.
Right. We don't think of them as great conquerors and warriors. But it's true. Like Pollan used to be, basically his rule number one was, I think, eat food, mostly plants, not too much, was the initial line. I'm not a huge vegetable person myself. I'm more of a protein type. But when you really think about it, it's like the idea: eat real food and don't eat too much of it. It's not that hard. People always say, and the one thing I used to say to people all the time, basically, if you just ate protein and vegetables, you'd be fine. And then people will say, oh, well, what about bagels? And I'm like, is it a protein or a vegetable?
Yeah.
It's not. Okay. And then they'll go, what about oatmeal? And I'm like, is it a protein or a vegetable? Like, nutrition is really simple, but people don't want, because what they really want is an answer that is, well, you can eat well and eat all the stuff that you actually want to eat.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, that isn't well. So I think with nutrition, the point being, we keep it very, very simple. We say to people, hey, just clean up your diet.
Yeah.
Try to drink more water. Try to drink less soda. Try to eat less processed food. And for a lot of times, people, there was another really good book. I can't think of the name of the book, my God. But the guy basically, what he basically said was that most people just eat too much.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
People think like you don't. I had helped a friend lose about 100 pounds one time. And one of the things I realized was that I changed the word meals to feedings, because his attachment to meal was significant. If I said to him, I want you to have 5 smaller meals a day, he had to have 5 meals. If I said 5 meals, he had 5 meals. And when I told him, I said, I need you to have 5 feedings a day. I need you to have 5 helpings of protein a day. But I took the word meal out of it. He did much better. because I didn't want him to have, people say, oh, you need to have smaller meals. Actually, you don't. You probably need to just have smaller servings of food throughout the day, or in some cases, just eat less. Intermittent fasting, right, suddenly became popular. What's intermittent fasting? It's not eating, right? What are they saying? Intermittent fasting is eating less, like eat less. Hey, that's really good advice. I like that, but it doesn't sell as well.
And now we have smartphones. It's so interesting. I downloaded this app called Callow and just track my calories a little bit. And it's amazing. It just changes your framework when you just think, okay, this is what I'm ingesting. This is about what my caloric burn is going to be for the day if I sit and do nothing. Then I add, what I'm burning, walking around, moving, working out, the other thing. And then let's eat something appropriate to it, right? And I think most people just don't realize the level of overconsumption, right? Because you don't realize that this little thing here I just grabbed, there's a lot of calories in that, right? It all adds up at the end of the
day. And it's the business. Do you want fries with that? Right? I mean, there's a business aspect to. There's a really good book called The End of Overeating, which is super interesting. But they talk about the amount of money, and it's in the billions, that is spent to get us to eat poorly. Again, the food companies are not on our side. The alcohol companies are not on our side. No one's on our side. No one. It's like nobody's coming to help you. No one's coming to help you except the Mike Boyles of the world. I'm coming to help you.
Everybody Boyle to the rescue.
That's right. The rest of the world not coming to help you. In fact, they're trying really hard because, and again, I could go on. There's another really good article called The Food Tobacco Link, and they talk about how the food companies started to do very much what the tobacco companies did. When the tobacco companies realized, okay, we're losing the battle here. They've said that cigarettes are killing people, but they were trying to figure out a way to we want to stay in the fight a little. So they literally started to talk about of individual responsibility. Hey, it's up to you. You can choose to smoke. You can choose to not smoke. There were different ways that they started to position themselves, and then they started to move into the food business. And what they realized more than anything is they needed time to get out of the tobacco business and into the food business. And then what did they do? They polluted the food business because they took the food business and they made it like the tobacco business, where they start thinking. Again, I could tell you stories forever, but I saw a great thing on 60 Minutes one time years ago where they talked about the difference between cranberry juice and cranberry juice cocktail. And the guy said the difference between cranberry juice and cranberry juice cocktail was high fructose corn syrup. He said, we took cranberry juice, which nobody liked. We didn't sell a lot of cranberry juice. We suddenly added all this sugar, high fructose corn syrup.
Sugar in, man.
We put sugar in it, and people loved the flavor, and people bought tons of this cranberry juice cocktail. And by the time we realized that it wasn't good for them, we were selling too much cranberry juice cocktail. So, what do, right? You don't stop and say, oh, never mind, we're not going to sell that anymore, right? If you're any large publicly traded company suddenly has to realize, oh, well, who's the responsibility? The responsibility is to the shareholder, not the consumer, right? So it's just there's so much of I sound like a freaking crazy government conspiracy theorist here, but maybe I am, but I just think that there's not, in healthcare, I don't think they really care about our health. Like you think about the word, right? Healthcare, I don't think they care about our health. I think they care about the system. And I think in food and in kind of big food, I think they care about the system. I think in pharmaceuticals, big pharma, I think they care about the system. I don't think, if you've ever watched any of the OxyContin movies, they're horrifying to realize what went on with the Sacklers and pain medication and this stuff. It happens at different levels all the time, and you can't do that with exercise, right? It would be great if we could package up really bad exercise and people would love it and sell it, but we really can't do that. They're trying with High Rocks, but they will not eventually succeed.
Let me ask you this: the person that's listening to this, the person that's listening to this podcast right now in their commute or whatever, and they're maybe in midlife, or maybe they're even younger and they're just not active and they're not feeling great. And they're one of these people that, look, 1 in 4 have a gym membership, right? I mean, a lot of people have them. What could they do walking in a gym that would change? I mean, what are things to avoid, right? What are the things that you're going to see people do this? Don't do it. And what could they do that's not complex, that would really improve their quality of life?
Right. Well, one, I'm going to tell you the simplest rule:
Yeah.
look at what everybody else is doing and don't do that. So if you go into the gym, what do you probably see? You probably see people walking on the treadmill. If you're a male, you probably see people doing upper body exercises for their chest and for their arms. So when you go in there, you realize, okay, what do I want to not do? I don't want to walk on the treadmill. I don't want to get focused on my chest and my biceps, right? I don't want to be a mirror muscle person where I'm looking at myself and thinking, hey, like here, like if we look at ourselves, what can we see, right? I can see my chest and my arms and my shoulders. So I think, okay, that's what I want to build up. The reality is what you want to build up is what you're sitting on and what's behind you. So when you start looking, I would say, what can somebody do? They can start to warm up and they can start to stretch and they can start to do full body strength training. Those are big things. Then they can start to do some interval training. Ideally for me, I'm an interval training on a bike, stationary bike person, because I don't think most people, if I said to you, I want you to run on the treadmill for a minute hard, yeah, you might fall off. You might not be able to get the treadmill to go up fast enough, but you probably wouldn't be able to get the benefit that I wanted. But if I gave you one of those air bikes, an assault bike or a Schwinn Airdyne, one of those, and I said, I want you to just do a minute hard and then 2 minutes easy, a minute hard, 2 minutes easy. I want you to get a heart rate monitor. There's all these really simple things that you can do, but probably what I'd really tell you to do is find like a non-chain. So, not a CrossFit, not an F45, like an MBSC Thrive that you found, right? Those places are out there. They exist. Oh my God. They're in conventional fitness settings. Okay. So, we're in with, I got to look this. You're going to have to edit me out because I'm going to,
We'll cut the pauses.
I can't think of the name of the chain. The guy that's doing this is going to be completely pissed off at me. And I'm having a mental, breakdown because it's not 24 hour. I'm going to say 24 hour. And it's like, he would have a conniption. Just one sec.
I'm breaking the radio rule of 5 seconds of dead air.
Yeah,
right?
and I apologize.
They always say. It's all right. It's all right. This is the great thing about.
So you could, it's LA Fitness has put some of these Thrive things in. There's another group called Alloy that has about 400 locations. Find a good, reputable program that will get you on a good total body strength training program. That really good quality hour a week. And if you can get that good quality hour a week, whether it's MBSC Thrive or Alloy or MBSC Thrives in, I think LA Fitness calls it P3. I forget exactly what the name is, but there are going to be some good programming options out there for people. Get involved in a good programming option. Stay out of kind of the circuit class, the boot camp class, that kind of stuff. Most of the time that you're just going to get beat up. You're going to get hurt. And that's going to be problematic. And then commit to it. So one of my favorite books, I've talked a lot about books, is called Slight Edge. Jeff Olson wrote Slight Edge, and he talks about Slight Edge principle. Slight Edge principle number 1, show up. Slight Edge principle number 2, keep showing up. Slight Edge principle number 3, show up with a great attitude. So the problem with fitness is that it is about continually showing up and then realizing that it's based around this idea of progressive resistance exercise. You got to try to do a little bit more, not a lot more than you did last time, but a little bit more. You've got to pick up the next dumbbell on the rack. You got to put the pin in the next spot on the machine. You've got to, try to continue to get stronger. You've got to try to continue to maybe keep your heart rate up for slightly longer. It's not super complicated, but you got to do it. You have to do the thing, right? People talk about that. Like, you got to go, and you can't go. And what people do is I'll go and walk on the treadmill for a couple minutes, and then I'll do a couple of machines. Like, that's not it, right? There is a formula, and the formula is, we talk about it. I'm going to foam roll. I'm going to kind of knead the tissue, right? Then I'm going to stretch the tissue. I'm going to get things out because I got to get myself back upright because we know we're going this way. I got to get myself back up this way. So I've got to be stretching. So I get back to that posture that's going to be beneficial. Then I got to warm up a little bit. Then, like you said, then I got to do some power stuff. I've got to, throw some medicine balls, or I've got to even just do a little skipping, right? Do something a little faster than what you would normally do. Total body strength training. That means I got to push something, I've got to pull something, and I've got to do something for my legs. I've got to do some kind of core exercise. Then I've got to do some sort of more aggressive interval program, something that's going to get my heart rate up a little bit. Again, and that's like, I'm a huge believer in heart rate monitors. Get yourself a heart rate monitor. Don't get a cheap watch. They're not as good. Chest straps tend to work better than the watches. And then start to get some sense of, figure out what's my resting heart rate. What happens when I exercise? Most people have no idea. They don't know what their resting heart rate is, and they have no idea what happens when they exercise. I could tell you exactly, I know exactly what my resting heart rate is, and I know exactly what happens when I exercise. And that's really, really important, because what's actually important is the difference between your resting heart rate and your maximum heart rate. You want that number to be as big as possible. So you look at somebody like me, my maximum heart rate is about 180 beats a minute. My resting heart rate is about 50. So I've got 130 beats of working area. That's a good, healthy heart, right? If you get someone whose resting heart rate is, in the 70s and they can't get up above 140, they've got 70 beats of working area in there. That's not healthy. So there's a lot. And we've been on. I actually have to wrap up because I had originally budgeted for an hour, and we're at an hour and 15.
Yeah, no, this has been great. I just want to ask you one more question, if we can wrap up on it. You spend your life helping people get stronger physically. I'm wondering what you've learned through strength training about helping people become stronger people, and how have you become stronger through helping people build strength?
I think what you realize is that it is about the people. It is about the connection. It is about the community. That's the stuff. Unfortunately, people or fortunately, I guess I shouldn't say unfortunately. Fortunately for us, people like to be in groups. People like community. And it's why sometimes bad fitness programs do well, because they create great community. And so what we want to do is create a really good fitness program and a really great community where you want to be that. I think Starbucks used to market, their whole thing was, we want to be your third place, right?
Yeah.
And, and we want to be that third place. We want to be that place, you've got to go to work, you've got to be home, but what's the third place? For us, we want Mike Boyle Strength and Conditioning to be your third place, a place where you come and think, hey, I like it there. The people like me there. The people treat me well there. That stuff's really, really important to get people to continue to come. If you can create some connection where people think, I like the instructors, I like the people in my group, I like the environment, that's going to go a really, really long way to helping somebody to stay on this fitness journey. The fitness journey is really easy to go on for 10 steps or so.
Yeah.
Right. But it's when you think, no, I've got to do this. I got to do it the rest of my life. This is something, and that's why we always say, if you give somebody a low barrier to entry, 2 hours, twice a week, 1 hour a day, you're going to really make a big difference. For us, the next big thing we want to do, add a third day. Get in here one more time. That'll make a really, really big difference. We're not looking for, we're looking for the person, like you said, not the person that loves to exercise, that wants to be in the gym 6 days a week. That's probably not us. That person will probably be okay on their own. But there aren't a lot of those people.
Yeah. Yeah. You're doing it for the rest of us.
Trying.
Mike, thanks for spending so much time talking. I loved it. And thanks for your expertise. You've made my life a little better. So I hope you, through this podcast.
Thank you for having me. Like I said,
yeah.
Thank you for hopefully delivering me to more of the real world, the world, the non-fitness world. This is what I need. I need to get on more of these podcasts where we're going to reach more people maybe who need the fitness advice but aren't looking for it. So thank you.
Pleasure is mine. Pleasure's all mine.